Okay, let's unpack this because we are starting this deep dive with a really powerful, sort of counterintuitive punchline. It cuts right to the heart of it all, doesn't it? Understanding without forgiveness is just bitterness with a diploma.
Hmm. That phrase, it just instantly nails the modern dilemma, I think. We're swimming in information, right? We
Mhm.
know the psych profiles, the history, the root causes for pretty much everything. But somehow, all that knowing often doesn't actually lead to inner peace.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's really fascinating here, and what our source material really drills down on, is that we're not looking at forgiveness as, some soft, purely altruistic thing.
Right, not just being nice.
Not at all. The sources frame it almost as a ruthless act of self-preservation, self-liberation, like a necessary upgrade for your own operating system.
Exactly. We're moving past just letting go and really digging into the mechanics of emotional freedom. So our mission today is to explore the specific material you shared,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on that split, that dichotomy between what's called being allergic to love, where you understand why something painful happened, but you deliberately keep the grudge,
Mm-hmm.
versus adopting what the sources call vaccine #4, which is taking all that understanding and then choosing to forgive.
Right, a conscious choice.
Yeah, and it's presented as this shortcut to getting real internal peace, even while, and this bit is crucial, keeping the knife sharp for self-protection, meaning you stay aware, you keep your boundaries.
And to really set the stage for this deep dive, we probably need to clarify those two core ideas right off the bat, the ones that describe the problem we're tackling. The first one is the diploma grudge.
Which is just such a brilliant phrase, isn't it?
It really is. This is resentment that you've completely justified. You've built a fortress around it with logic, with evidence. You've done the reading, maybe seen the therapist, you've got the timeline, the proof.
You've got the receipts.
You got the receipts, exactly. And so you feel totally entitled to hang on to that anger forever. The diploma is basically your certificate saying, my bitterness. Oh, it's perfectly rational.
And then the second concept, the real internal cost, is the emotional debt.
Ah, yes.
That's the pain you keep carrying, maybe out of pride. You refuse to zero out that internal balance sheet. It's almost like you feel the person who hurt you still owes you that distress, right? The sleepless nights, the turmoil they caused.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at how you discharge that debt, not for them, not for their benefit at all, but purely for your own release.
Think of it like this. The diploma grudge is the legal framework you build to rationalize keeping the debt.
Yep.
And the emotional debt. That's the actual amount sitting on your internal books, just racking up toxic interest day after day.
Right, compounding misery. Okay, so let's start with the diagnosis. Let's dissect this state of being allergic to love. Because this isn't just everyday anger, is it? It feels like a very specific kind of modern problem that traps really smart, aware people.
It really does. This isn't the person who's just, ignorant, doesn't see the other side. No, this person has often meticulously cataloged the offender's whole life story.
They know the backstory.
They know everything. The dysfunctional family, the pressure they were under at work, the past trauma that shaped their bad choices. They see the side, they get the story, they understand the whole context of the betrayal or the insult, and yet they refuse to let that understanding actually bring them peace.
And that's where the source material gets really sharp, I think.
Yeah.
They consciously choose to keep the understanding over here and the emotional outcome over there.
Completely separate compartments.
Yeah. And they actively decide to just keep replaying the insult. Like you said, like a favorite movie, but a painful one.
Yeah.
And the intellectual understanding, ironically, becomes the very reason they keep the resentment going.
That is the absolute core conflict. It's what the sources call the CLOWNFATHER'S commentary on this enlightened grudge holder.
Clownfather.
Yeah. This person has done the reading, right? They've heard the excuses. They might have even, nodded sympathetically during a conversation about it. But the grudge itself, oh, that stays sealed up tight. Like a bottle of really fine but increasingly toxic wine down in the cellar, just waiting for that perfect cold moment to serve it up again.
Wow. That takes a lot of internal effort, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess the term clownfather is used because, despite all this sophisticated processing, the end result, staying tied to the pain, is fundamentally a bit, absurd.
Precisely. It's like performing mental gymnastics just to maintain a state of justifiable suffering. It's exhausting. The sources compare it to downloading the software update and refusing to install it.
Oh, okay, I get that.
You have all the necessary data right there for internal peace, for a system upgrade, but you're intentionally staying stuck on the old, buggy, high-resource version of yourself. just because you refuse to make that final click that says, install update, release.
Okay, wait. If they've done all this reading and they get it intellectually, they understand they should release it, why is that last step so incredibly hard? What's the real resistance? Is it just pride?
Well, that brings us right back to that crucial pivot point and how the source defines forgiveness. The resistance hangs around because we fundamentally misunderstand what forgiveness is. In this framework, forgiveness is not saying what happened was okay. Let's just repeat that because it's key.
Yeah, absolutely critical.
It is not absolution for the offender. It's a declaration of your own sovereignty. It's you saying, okay, I see what you did. I understand it, maybe. But I am now withdrawing the energy you need to keep affecting my happiness today. I am not renting my headspace to this clown anymore.
Okay. So the focus flips entirely. It's not about whether the offender deserves it or if they've changed or anything about them. It becomes purely a selfish act, an act of self-liberation.
Absolutely. The second you realize that, you see the power is totally in your hands. You become the mental landlord.
The mental landlord. I like that.
You're the one deciding who gets space in your head, right? Who gets to live there rent-free, constantly messing up the place, draining your mental utilities, maybe years after the event. If you're constantly thinking about the offense, replaying conversations, planning what you should have said, secretly hoping they fail, you are effectively still paying them prime real estate rent in your mind.
That rent gets paid with your present focus, your joy, your energy. Wow. Okay, I can really see why the sources call this a ruthless act of self-interest. Evicting the grudge means reclaiming your own mental assets.
And we do need to dig into the psychological root of why we cling so tightly to resentment, even when we logically know the way out. Often it stems from a trauma pattern.
Okay.
A learned belief, maybe unconscious, that safety comes from never forgetting a hurt. We hold on to the pain, the memory, the anger, like it's a shield.
Right, like if I forget, I'll be vulnerable again.
Exactly. The internal logic goes, if I relax my guard, if I actually forgive, I'm just setting myself up to be hurt in the exact same way again. The grudge becomes this faulty but familiar defense mechanism.
It feels protective, but it's an incredibly expensive protection racket, isn't it? The cost is your current quality of life.
That's it, precisely. And this leads straight into the typical reaction, that really deep cognitive dissonance. Your rational brain, the understanding part, has signed off. Yep, I get why they did it. Desperation, bad upbringing, backed into a corner, whatever. But the emotional system just overrides it, shouting, nope, I'm keeping the resentment anyway, because that pain, that proves I was wronged, and that confirmation is my safety net. This internal battle prevents the emotional release needed for healing. And it leaves you stuck in that intellectualized bitterness. The diploma grudge.
Okay, this is where this deep dive gets really interesting, I think. Because it's not just, modern self-help talk. This connects directly to ancient wisdom and is backed up by modern behavioral science, too. When you really look at the philosophical cost, the cognitive cost of holding on to that grudge, you see this universal, time-tested truth emerge, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
The price of resentment is always higher than the cost of letting it go.
The cost is genuinely devastating, and it hits you on every single level of functioning, starting way back with philosophy like Stoicism. The Stoics had this powerful, really actionable warning about chaining yourself to the past.
People know Marcus Aurelius? Maybe, but they often miss how practical his ideas are for this exact problem.
Right. Aurelius talked directly to that mental landlord idea. He basically said that holding on to anger is like letting someone else rule your mind. If someone can hurt you once, okay, that happened. But if, through the memory of that hurt, they can still control your emotional state years down the line...
Well, they effectively own your internal agency, don't they?
Yeah, they're still pulling the strings. The whole Stoic goal was total sovereignty over your inner life. They used techniques like negative visualization, thinking about how temporary everything external is, including offenses, and fiercely distinguishing what's internal, your reaction, versus what's external, their action. The moment you grant forgiveness, you perform the ultimate Stoic act. You basically say, okay, that offense, that was an external event. It no longer has jurisdiction over my internal reaction.
So holding the grudge is fundamentally anti-Stoic because you're letting something external from the past dictate the quality of your present, letting it rule your mind.
Precisely. And we can actually start to quantify this drain, moving from ancient philosophy right into modern behavioral economics. Grudges aren't just emotionally tiring, they seriously drain your cognitive bandwidth. And this isn't just a metaphor, it's measurable resource consumption.
Okay, spell that out. What does that actually look like in daily life? How does replaying an insult drain my bandwidth?
Well, it drains what scientists call your executive function. That's your brain's CEO, basically. It handles focus, planning, juggling tasks, making complex decisions. If a chunk of your brain is constantly running the grudge replay program in the background, collecting evidence, imagining future arguments, maintaining that feeling of justified victimhood that uses up vital processing power.
Ah, okay. It's like having too many apps open on your mental computer running constantly.
Exactly like that. And it leads to decision fatigue in totally unrelated parts of your life. You might struggle to focus on a creative project. Maybe you make poor financial choices. Not because of the grudge itself directly, but because the mental energy needed to keep that diploma grudge polished and on display has left you with basically zero reserves for clear thinking. It's a huge invisible tax on your productivity and creativity.
Wow. And if we go even deeper psychologically,
Hmm.
the Jungian view adds another layer, right?
Mhm.
A kind of spiritual and identity cost.
Yes, Jungian psychology talks a lot about the shadow, those parts of ourselves we don't integrate, that we often suppress. Holding grudges. That keeps the shadow incredibly well fed. The grudge itself can become a source of negative identity. I am the one who was wronged. I am the one who's justified in being angry.
Right. It becomes part of who you think you are.
Exactly. And clinging to that victim identity stops the conscious self from integrating and moving into a place of real power and agency. Your conscious self is basically starved, while the shadow, the bitter, resentful, judgmental part, gets stronger and stronger.
That's powerful. The pain stops being just about the thing that happened and it starts being about you.
And if you connect all these dots, philosophy, behavioral economics, psychology, you start to see why almost every major global worldview lands in the exact same conclusion about liberation from this. It's not a coincidence, it's like a universal observation about how humans work, or rather, how we get stuck.
Let's spend a moment here because that consensus across different religions and spiritual paths is really striking. It needs proper context.
Okay, starting with Buddhism. Forgiveness there isn't seen as a transaction at all. It's a fundamental act of self-liberation. It's about breaking the karmic chain that binds you to the offense.
The karmic chain.
Yeah. If you keep holding the resentment, you're mentally and emotionally locked into the orbit of the person who hurt you. Your reaction ensures that event keeps shaping your karma, your future experience. To release the resentment is to cut that chain. It's recognizing that the only person you're really punishing by holding on to the anger is yourself. It's the ultimate act of detachment.
And the Christian perspective, how does that fit in?
Well, the Christian perspective, often citing Luke 6.37, says very clearly, "Forgive, and you will be forgiven." Now, that's often taken just as an external command, but within the context of these sources, it's also seen as a kind of psychological mechanism. The emphasis is on the action you need to take to receive reciprocal internal peace. You can't fully experience grace or self-acceptance if you're actively refusing to extend that basic idea to others, no matter what they did or whether they deserve it.
Oh, that makes sense. And that connects pretty directly to the Islamic tradition too, right?
Absolutely. In Islam, the Qur'an really reinforces this idea of reciprocal grace. It asks the believer, "Pardon and overlook, would you not like that Allah should forgive you?" That's from Surah 24, verse 22. It deeply links the act of you granting grace to your own desire for grace. The implication is clear. Holding on to intense negativity kind of contradicts the humility and openness you need to experience divine favor, or even just basic inner peace.
And finally, Hinduism. We see this idea of detachment and eagle vision there too.
Yes, definitely. In Hinduism, particularly in the Bhagavad Gita, there's this wisdom about seeing with equal vision a friend, a foe, and a stranger. Now, achieving that equal vision requires profound emotional detachment. When someone hurts you, you assign them massive emotional weight, right? They can become an obsession. To forgive, in this sense, is to consciously release that obsession. You allow the person who hurt you to just fade into the moral background. They become no more emotionally significant than a stranger passing on the street. It's about rebalancing your whole emotional universe.
So the message is overwhelming, really, from all these angles.
Yeah.
Holding the grudge costs you. It costs your energy, your focus, your spiritual well-being, your emotional stability.
And this naturally moves us from just the individual costs to the moral and social truth. The sources are really clear here. Without forgiveness, communities just fracture. If we can't release past offenses, society can't function properly. Families can't heal. Organizations get stuck because everyone's busy maintaining their own diploma grudge spreadsheet against someone else.
Yeah, you see that everywhere.
But with forgiveness, bridges can be rebuilt. And the source clarifies something important. This rebuilding isn't always about becoming close again. Sometimes it's specifically just for achieving peace. You can absolutely set firm boundaries, you can pursue justice through legal channels if you need to, and still, internally, release that emotional debt. The two aren't mutually exclusive.
Okay, so we've really laid out the massive cost of holding on to that grudge. Now let's pivot to the solution, the healthy alternative. This is the vaccine #4 idea, the conscious choice to understand, then forgive. This is where we get practical, right? The process is laid out in 3 steps: acknowledge, accept, and release.
And the absolutely essential part here is that it has to be a conscious choice. Forgiveness isn't some passive feeling that just washes over you one day when you magically feel ready. No, it's a firm executive decision. You have to internally say, okay, I choose to free myself from this weight now, regardless of how I might still feel about the person who caused it. It needs active participation from your conscious mind, specifically overriding those habitual, protective emotional reactions that are screaming for continued vigilance.
Right, you had to actively decide. And to make that decision real, not just an idea, we need practical tools. The sources give some really actionable advice for getting past that endless rumination, which seems to be the main energy suck.
Yes, the core recommendation is simple but powerful. Replace the rumination, that mental loop of replaying the insult or injury, with one concrete step toward closure. So the moment you catch yourself replaying that argument in your head, you stop. You consciously ask, what is one small positive thing I can do right now to move forward? That redirection is absolutely key.
And there's also that powerful psychological tip, the therapy tip, which helps externalize the internal burden. It makes the release feel more tangible.
Yes, the symbolic act. It's surprisingly effective. It involves writing down the whole grievance, the entire diploma grudge, all the details on a piece of paper. Not to send it, just to get it out of your head and onto the page.
Externalize it.
Exactly. Then you safely burn the paper. You watch the smoke rise, maybe let the ashes blow away. This physical ritual gives your subconscious mind a really clear signal. Okay, this item has been processed, the facts acknowledged, the case file is now symbolically and physically closed. It works because our minds often need that sense of finality to actually stop obsessing over something.
That makes sense. It turns an abstract idea into a real-world event. It grounds the release.
Right.
But how do we make sure that while we're releasing the debt, we don't accidentally drop our self-protection? Because that seems to be the #1 fear of the enlightened grudge holder, right? If I forgive, I'll get hurt again.
That's addressed very clearly in the coach section, which lays out specific DOs and don'ts. The DOs are straightforward. Understand the context, why it happened, release the emotional debt, the internal charge, and then move forward. And crucially, moving forward absolutely includes establishing and maintaining firm boundaries based on what you now understand about the person or situation.
Okay, so understanding informs the boundaries.
Yeah.
And the don'ts. This is where the subtle traps probably lie.
The don'ts are critical for keeping that internal peace once you've claimed it. Specifically, the sources warn against rehashing the grievance over and over again to others after you've supposedly forgiven, against weaponizing the knowledge you have about the person's weaknesses, their trauma, their flaws, using it against them later, and maybe the most subtle one, secretly celebrating their failures.
Ooh, okay. So if you say, oh yeah, I've forgiven them, but then you're secretly checking their social media hoping their life is falling apart, you haven't actually passed the internal test.
Exactly right. If you're still emotionally invested in their downfall, even secretly, you haven't truly performed the self-rescue. You're still paying rent in your head. You've just switched from passive, resentful rent to active, hostile rent. The real sign of release is genuine indifference to their ongoing existence, unless, of course, that existence directly bumps up against your boundaries again.
Indifference, not necessarily warmth.
Okay.
And there's a simple daily practice suggested, too, for building this release muscle.
Yeah, just naming one person or one minor thing or one situation you are consciously releasing today. It can be tiny, the driver who cut you off this morning, a petty comment from a colleague. The point is to build the habit of conscious non-retention. Don't let the small stuff pile up.
Practice letting go daily.
And we absolutely have to mention the clown tip, which is maybe the best bit of branding in the whole source material. Don't be the museum curator of your own pain. Stop dusting off your past traumas and exhibiting them like they're these precious masterpieces that define who you are now. Because let's be honest, if you insist on curating a museum of pain, the only visitors you're going to attract are other miserable people.
Ouch. But true. And when you stop being that curator, that's when you start seeing the real payoff,
Mm.
right? The actual quantifiable return on your investment. This is the forgiveness dividend.
Mm.
We're moving from just feeling vaguely better into tangible gains.
We talked about the emotional debt you've been holding hostage. The immediate dividend is releasing that hostage. Specifically, the forgiveness dividend is described as the lump sum of mental capital and energy that gets returned to your account the moment you release that resentment. And this isn't just theory. People report it feels like suddenly having an extra hour of focused energy in their day. It's real.
Wow, an actual energy return. And even more profoundly, you gain peace credit. What's that exactly?
Peace credit is the deep self-trust you build up when you prove to yourself that you are capable of letting go, that you can prioritize your own internal peace over the need for external justice or revenge. This self-trust is vital for resilience later on. It confirms that your happiness comes from within, that it's not dependent on what other people do or don't do.
You trust yourself to handle things internally.
Exactly. And the sources give a really moving example of this dividend in action. They call it love in action, the story of Maya. Maya had been badly hurt years ago by a friend, a serious professional betrayal. After doing the work, adopting vaccine, #4, she runs into this person completely unexpectedly.
Oh, the moment of truth. What did the old grudge holder part of her want to do?
Well, the old Maya, the allergic to love Maya, would have instantly stiffened up. The whole betrayal tape would have started playing in her head. Maybe she'd offer a cold, brittle hello, and then she'd spend the next 3 hours chewing over the encounter.
Been there.
Right. But the new Maya, the one who'd consciously discharged the emotional debt, she simply acknowledged the shared past. She smiled, genuinely, not a fake, strained smile, but a light one, wished them well, and just walked away.
And the key is what happened inside her head after walking away, right?
Exactly. The source really emphasizes that she walked away lighter. There was no bitterness bubbling up, no mental replay loop starting, no urge to call someone and dissect the interaction. The emotional resources that would have been instantly consumed by the old grudge were simply still there, intact, available for the rest of her day. She kept her peace credit, proving to herself that the past offense no longer had the power to define or diminish her present moment. That's the dividend.
Okay, now let's connect this really powerful emotional and philosophical shift to the measurable physical reality. We're moving into the scientific lens now, which actually validates these claims of forgiveness being a self-rescue operation.
Yeah, and this is crucial, especially for that enlightened grudge holder, the person with the diploma grudge, because they often need the empirical proof, the data. And the data is there.
Yeah.
Our bodies register internal conflict as measurable physiological stress. Holding a grudge isn't just a state of mind, it's a full-body experience.
So what are the actual measurable consequences of holding on to that sustained resentment? What does the science show?
Well, that chronic vigilance, that state of being constantly on guard that comes with resentment, keeps your nervous system locked in the sympathetic state that's fight or flight.
Always brace for impact.
Always. Which means your body is constantly releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. When that state persists long-term, the body pays a heavy price. But studies show that when forgiveness is genuinely granted, the act itself directly lowers blood pressure. The mechanism seems clear. Letting go reduces that constant vigilance, which allows the cardiovascular system to relax, reducing constriction in blood vessels.
Wow. So you are literally physically unclogging your internal plumbing by letting go of old emotional pain.
That's a great way to put it. It also directly reduces those circulating stress hormones, and maybe most profoundly, it helps restore nervous system balance. It shifts you out of that exhausting high-alert fight-or-flight mode and back into the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest mode. This is likely why people who genuinely forgive often report sleeping much deeper and feeling less overall anxiety.
So it's not just, feel-good philosophy anymore. It's verifiable cardiology and endocrinology. Hard science backing it up.
Absolutely. And energetically, though harder to measure conventionally, the benefit is described as clearing stagnant emotional fields. Think of resentment as stuck, low-vibration energy. When you harbor it, that energy just sits there, blocking flow. When you release it, you create space. Space for positive, creative energy to move in. The ultimate analogy antonym used in the source material is perfect here. It's like finally deleting an old resource-hogging virus from your computer system.
As opposed to keeping the virus, maybe quarantined, thinking you need it as proof of the infection, while it just quietly degrades your system performance and makes you vulnerable to other problems.
Exactly that. And once that past stops owning you, once that toxic software is finally deleted, what becomes possible is the ultimate freedom. Your mind literally opens up. All that cognitive bandwidth that was tied up cataloging injuries and replaying pain is suddenly free, available for joy, for connection, for creativity. You start seeing the present moment more accurately instead of looking at everything through the distorting filter of past betrayals.
You stop seeing every new person or opportunity through the lens of, how could this go wrong like last time?
It's really the ultimate sales pitch for living well, isn't it? As the marketer within the source puts it, forgiveness is self-rescue disguised as grace. You might look gracious to the outside world, sure, but internally, you've just successfully performed a complex, critical, life-saving extraction procedure on yourself, restoring your own natural functionality.
That's a powerful reframe. And that profound internal shift, that self-rescue, brings us to the fundamental, inescapable choice that underlies this whole deep dive.
It does. The final law, as the source material calls it, the entire complex process boils down to one stark binary choice. Let it go or let it own you. There really is no comfortable middle ground, no neutral territory where you can keep the grudge but also have peace. You can't hold on to the perceived benefits of the diploma grudge, the justification, the victim identity, and simultaneously enjoy genuine internal freedom. The two are just mutually exclusive.
And yet, here's the happy part. The real payoff that makes the conscious effort, the work of choosing release, absolutely worth it. You start walking into rooms unburdened, literally lighter, without that mental baggage weighing you down. You sleep deeper because your brain isn't constantly running threat assessments and rehearsing old arguments all night. You find yourself smiling more easily, without that old tension pulling at the corners of your mouth.
And that freedom, that lightness, it becomes intensely addictive, but in the healthiest possible way. Once you get a taste of it, you become fiercely protective of it. You instantly recognize when an old resentment tries to creep back in, or when a new minor offense tries to set up shop and demand rent in your head. You become a very, very assertive mental landlord.
Oh, I like that. A vigilant landlord for your own peace.
Aha!
So, as you, our listener, move forward with this idea that understanding without forgiveness is just bitterness wearing a cap and gown, we really challenge you to consider the immediate practical application. Look inside, honestly, and ask yourself, who are you still holding in your mental jail? Whose file are you still keeping active? And just imagine, how would your energy, your actual available energy, fundamentally shift if you use that therapy tip, do the symbolic act, and truly release them today?
Think about that sudden influx of peace credit, that massive return of cognitive bandwidth. That resource is just sitting there waiting for you to claim it.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.